The neighborhood was silent, the streetlights glowing faintly on empty driveways and trimmed lawns, but in the shadows, one figure was always awake. Karen. Everyone knew her from the HOA. She wasn't friendly or warm. She was the one who noticed every detail. A trash bin left out, a car parked too long, a fence the wrong color. She always had a complaint, always a rule to point out. But lately, she had changed. Her behavior wasn't just nosy anymore. It was strange. Neighbors whispered about seeing her outside at midnight, clipboard in hand. Others claimed she was taking pictures of yards, writing down license plates, slipping notes under doors. At first, people shrugged it off as Karen being Karen. But soon, the unease spread. Something wasn't right. One night, Mr. Lewis, walking his dog, spotted her at the community board. Karen wasn't just reading announcements. She was pinning papers onto the board. She kept looking over her shoulder, stapling the sheets quickly, before vanishing into the dark. By morning, confusion swept the street. On the board was a new notice. New HOA rules, effective immediately. The list stunned everyone. No cars in driveways after 9 p.m. No pets over 20 pounds. No toys or bikes in front yards. No holiday decorations of any kind. Gasps and anger spread. Parents worried about their kids' bikes. Dog owners panicked. Families who decorated their homes each year felt robbed. "When was this decided?" Mrs. Jenkins asked. "We never voted," Mr. Alvarez said firmly. Calls to the HOA office confirmed it. No new rules had been approved. Then whispers started again. People remembered Karen at the board the night before. They remembered her late-night snooping. The truth was obvious. Karen had made up her own rules and posted them like they were real. When confronted, Karen didn't deny it. She stood tall and said, "These rules are for the good of the neighborhood. Everyone must follow them." But instead of obeying, neighbors grew angrier. Some began taking pictures of her sneaking around. Others collected her fake warnings. It was clear Karen was trying to take control. The peaceful neighborhood was no longer peaceful. Blinds stayed half open at night. Parents kept their children close. Everyone was waiting to see what Karen would try next. But what Karen didn't know was that her secret plan was already crumbling. Evidence was being gathered. Whispers were turning into action. And soon, the woman who wanted power over everyone would face the one thing she never expected: her plan backfiring. The whispers about Karen's strange behavior were still fresh when the neighborhood woke up to another shock. A new notice appeared, larger than the last one, pinned neatly on the community board. Bold letters screamed across the top. "Mandatory home color change, effective immediately. Every homeowner," it read, "must repaint their house in the exact same shade of desert beige. Not next year, not when it was convenient, now." And those who refused, they would face daily fines until they obeyed. The rule hit like a punch. Some families had just spent thousands on fresh paint last year. Others loved the unique look of their homes, soft blues, warm yellows, even the brick red house on the corner that kids called the gingerbread home. Now, all of that was being erased by one bland, lifeless color. At first, people laughed in disbelief. Mrs. Carter, watering her flowers, chuckled to her neighbor, "This has to be a joke, right?" But when she looked closer, her smile faded. Karen's signature sat at the bottom of the notice, stamped with an imitation HOA seal. The laughter didn't last long. Within hours, Karen herself was walking the streets with her clipboard, pointing at houses, jotting down notes. She snapped photos on her phone, warning homeowners they would be fined if they didn't comply. "You need to start painting immediately," she told Mr. and Mrs. Alvarez, who had just finished repainting their home a calm sea green 6 months earlier. "Rules are rules. Beige is the standard now." The Alvarezes tried to argue, but Karen's voice grew sharp. "Non-compliance means daily fines. Don't make me report you." Word spread quickly. By evening, the entire neighborhood was buzzing with outrage. Families gathered in driveways, shaking their heads in disbelief. One man raised his voice, shouting, "Who does she think she is? She can't just make up rules." Another neighbor uttered, "She's gone too far this time." Still, Karen patrolled like a self-declared officer. She walked the sidewalks with authority, scribbling down addresses, snapping photos as if she were building a case against her own community. But her act didn't fool everyone. Some neighbors noticed her fake official seal wasn't quite right. Others quietly took photos of Karen as she marched up and down the block, collecting her so-called evidence. They weren't just angry anymore. They were preparing. The ridiculous rule, meant to control, only lit a fire of resistance. Behind closed doors, neighbors whispered late into the night. Plans were forming, strategies discussed. No one wanted to repaint their homes beige, and no one was going to let Karen's obsession take over their lives. What Karen didn't see was the shift in the air. For the first time, the neighborhood wasn't divided in silence. They were uniting, slowly, against her. And while she walked proudly with her clipboard, convinced she was untouchable, the seeds of her downfall were already being planted. For a few days, the neighborhood looked like it was surrendering. Paint cans appeared on porches, ladders leaned against walls, and the once colorful street began to fade into the same dull shade of desert beige. One house after another lost its identity, swallowed by the flat color that Karen demanded. Some families grumbled as they painted. Others sighed in defeat, saying it was easier to obey than risk fines. Karen strutted up and down the sidewalks, clipboard in hand, smiling as though she had finally proven her power. But then, one house stood out. Mr. Carter, a retired veteran with a strong voice and a proud stance, refused. His home was a deep navy blue, freshly painted the year before. As Karen stood in his driveway, barking about fines and rules, he simply crossed his arms and said, "This is my house. I'll paint it the color I want." His words echoed across the street. A few neighbors paused mid-brushstroke, watching him. Someone whispered, "Did you hear that?" He said no. Another murmured, "Maybe we don't have to give in." Karen's smile faltered for the first time. She snapped a photo of the Carter home and scribbled furiously on her clipboard. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "Non-compliance will cost you daily fines." But Mr. Carter didn't move. "I've faced worse than you," he said firmly. "You don't scare me." The moment was small, but it spread like a spark on dry grass. Neighbors whispered about Carter's boldness. Some began to wonder, what if they resisted too? What if Karen's rules weren't as powerful as she claimed? That night, lights burned late in living rooms as families talked quietly. A few said they couldn't afford fines, but others argued that Karen's rules weren't even official. If Carter could stand up to her, maybe they all could. The next morning, beige paint still spread across the street, but now it carried hesitation. People worked slower, casting nervous glances toward the Carter house, where the bold navy walls stood proud against the growing sea of beige. Karen passed by often, glaring at the house like it was a personal insult. She left notices taped to the door, all stamped with her fake seal. But Carter never tore them down. He left them hanging for everyone to see, proof that Karen's threats meant nothing to him. Whispers turned into quiet smiles. People walking their dogs slowed down just to admire the Carter home. Children pointed and giggled, saying, "That's the only pretty one left." The neighborhood hadn't rebelled yet, but the idea was planted. One man's defiance was enough to make others believe resistance was possible. And Karen, blinded by her need for control, had no idea how dangerous that one spark of rebellion would become. Karen could not ignore Carter's defiance. His navy blue house stood like a challenge, a wall of resistance against everything she demanded. To her, it wasn't just about paint anymore. It was about power, and she was determined to crush him. Within days, Carter's mailbox overflowed with letters. Each one carried the HOA seal and bold warnings in red ink. Non-compliance fine, $250 daily. The numbers stacked quickly, threatening thousands of dollars. Then came the legal letters, pages filled with threats of lawsuits, liens, and property seizure if he refused to obey. As if that wasn't enough, Carter's access card to the community pool and fitness center suddenly stopped working. His name was quietly removed from the community guest list, barring his family from neighborhood events. Karen made sure he felt isolated, cut off from the very community he had lived in for years. But Carter did not back down. Instead of hiding, he grew louder. He stood on his porch one evening as neighbors gathered around, holding up the stack of fines and threats. His voice carried strong and clear. "This isn't about paint anymore. This is about freedom. If they can tell me what color my house has to be, what will they take from you next? Your decorations? Your pets? Your right to live in peace?" The crowd listened, uneasy but moved. Some nodded, others whispered, but everyone felt the weight of his words. Karen, watching from across the street, fumed. She doubled her efforts, sending patrols past Carter's house, snapping photos as if documenting a crime scene. She posted new warnings on the community board, declaring, "Rules are rules, and violators will be punished." Still, Carter refused to bend. Every notice she taped to his door, he left hanging for all to see. Every fine she issued, he read aloud to his neighbors, exposing the absurdity of it all. His defiance, once a lonely act, was quickly becoming a rallying cry. At night, small groups of neighbors met quietly in kitchens and garages. They talked about Carter's stand, about the unfair rules, and about how much power the HOA really had. For the first time, people were asking not, "How do we obey?" but instead, "How do we fight back?" Karen thought she was winning by tightening her grip. But in truth, her heavy hand was only fueling the rebellion. The more she tried to silence Carter, the louder his voice became. And soon, his fight would no longer be his alone. The neighborhood had never felt so divided. On one side stood Carter and the growing number of neighbors who admired his courage. They whispered encouragement when he passed by, some even leaving small notes in his mailbox. "Stay strong, we're with you." At night, a few quietly stopped painting their homes beige, hoping no one would notice their silent support. But not everyone was brave. Many families were terrified of the HOA's power. They had seen the fines piled on Carter, the legal letters, the way his access to community amenities was cut off. They didn't want to risk the same punishment, so they obeyed, repainting their homes, keeping their heads down, and pretending not to notice the fight. The tension was everywhere. Once friendly neighbors now avoided each other. Lawn conversations turned into sharp arguments. Mrs. Jenkins snapped at Mr. Alvarez one morning, "Why won't you stand up with Carter? Don't you see what's happening?" He shot back, "Easy for you to say. You don't have kids to worry about. I can't afford fines like that." The street that once echoed with laughter and barbecues now buzzed with suspicion. Curtains twitched at night. People chose sides silently, either nodding at Carter in support or crossing the street to avoid him. Karen, of course, believed she was winning. She strutted through the neighborhood with her clipboard, satisfied as more homes turned beige each day. To her, the sight of uniform color was proof of her control. She dismissed Carter as a loud troublemaker, certain he would eventually break under the pressure. But she didn't see what was really happening. While the streets appeared to bend to her will, something was forming in the shadows, something she couldn't control. Quiet meetings in garages, whispered plans at kitchen tables, and secret exchanges of evidence against her. People were angry, but they were also careful. And they knew Karen was watching, so they moved silently, building a case she couldn't stop. The neighborhood was split on the surface, but beneath that surface, unity was growing, against her. And when it finally came to light, Karen would never see it coming. It happened early on a Saturday morning. Most families were just waking up when the sound of loud engines broke the quiet street. A truck pulled up in front of Carter's house, followed by two men in paint-stained overalls. They unloaded ladders, rollers, and huge buckets of beige paint. Karen was there too, clipboard in hand, grinning like she had already won. She announced loudly, "The board has approved this. If Mr. Carter won't comply, we will do it for him." Carter rushed out of his front door, furious. "You can't touch my house! This is private property!" he shouted. His voice shook with anger, but Karen only smirked and gestured for the workers to begin. The moment the first ladder scraped against Carter's wall, something snapped in the neighborhood. Doors swung open, curtains flew back. Neighbors spilled onto their lawns, drawn by the noise and the sight of the HOA trying to take control. Some grabbed their phones and started recording. Others shouted from across the street, "Stop! You can't do that! That's illegal! Leave his house alone!" The workers hesitated, caught in the storm of voices. But Karen barked, "Keep going! You're being paid! Don't listen to them!" By now, a crowd had formed. Parents, kids, even the quiet neighbors who never spoke. They were all there, standing shoulder to shoulder. The beige paint in the workers' buckets suddenly looked less like a rule and more like a weapon against them all. One brave neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, stepped right in front of the ladder. "If you're going to paint his house, you'll have to go through me," she said, her voice steady. Others quickly joined her, forming a line between the workers and Carter's home. Carter stood on his porch, overwhelmed. What had started as his lone fight was now something much bigger. The HOA had gone too far, and the neighborhood knew it. Phones captured everything. Karen's, orders, the workers' hesitation, the neighbors shouting in defense. Within minutes, the situation spread across social media. Comments flooded in. "This is abuse of power. That HOA needs to be stopped. Stay strong, Carter." Karen didn't realize it yet, but her control had slipped away. What was once fear had turned into defiance. The people she thought she ruled were now united, against her. The breaking point had arrived, and there was no going back. The video spread faster than anyone expected. By the end of the day, it had already been shared thousands of times. By the next morning, it was everywhere. Local news stations ran the clip on repeat, showing Karen shouting at neighbors while workers tried to paint over Carter's house. Headlines called it HOA Gone Wild and the Beige Takeover. The HOA board thought they were untouchable, but suddenly their phones wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters wanted interviews, angry homeowners wanted answers, lawyers began circling, each one promising to bring the board to court for abuse of power, harassment, and even trespassing. Karen, once proud and confident, now looked pale and nervous. The smug smile she wore when ordering the repainting job had completely vanished. Every time she left her house, neighbors pointed and whispered. Some shouted openly, "You should be ashamed. Step down, Karen. You ruined this community." What hit the hardest was that even the people who once supported her had turned away. Families who kept quiet before were now speaking up, demanding change. They were tired of being controlled. They were tired of being afraid. At the next HOA meeting, the room was packed. Dozens of neighbors stood shoulder to shoulder, holding signs that read, "No more Karen," and "Our homes, our rules." The board tried to stay calm, but their voices cracked under the pressure. For the first time, they were the ones being silenced. One man raised his phone, playing the viral video out loud for the entire room. The crowd booed. Another neighbor shouted, "This is who you put in charge! This is your leadership?" Karen tried to defend herself. She stammered something about order and protecting property values, but the words fell flat. The community wasn't buying it anymore. The regret on her face was clear. She had gone too far, and now she was the villain in a story told across the internet. What she thought was control had turned into humiliation. By the end of that meeting, the demand was undeniable. The HOA board must resign. What once looked like solid power now crumbled like sand slipping through fingers. Karen sat in silence, her eyes fixed on the floor. Every decision she made, every rule she forced, had led to this moment. Her secret plan, the one she thought would make her stronger, had only destroyed her reputation. For the first time, Karen understood the cost of pushing too far, and it was a cost she could never take back. The days after the HOA's downfall felt like a new world for the neighborhood. The ridiculous desert beige rule was the first thing to go. With lawyers involved and public pressure mounting, the rule was declared invalid. The HOA was ordered to pay heavy fines for harassment and abuse of power. What was once their weapon now turned into their punishment. Carter, the man who refused to bow down, became a hero in the eyes of his neighbors. People who barely spoke to him before now stopped by to thank him. Some brought pies, others shook his hand, and kids waved when they saw him walking his dog. His stand against the HOA had not only saved his own house, but had also given the entire community a new voice. The biggest irony came soon after. For years, the HOA tried to make the neighborhood look uniform, dull beige walls, matching fences, trimmed lawns. But once the rule was gone, a wave of color spread like wildfire. One house turned sky blue, another chose a warm red. Someone even painted cheerful yellow shutters just to celebrate their freedom. The street, once quiet and controlled, now looked alive again. Walking down the block felt different. Neighbors who once avoided each other were now laughing, painting, and sharing stories about the ordeal. It was as if the fight against Karen and the board had not only freed their homes, but had also united their hearts. As for Karen and the HOA board, their names were now etched in infamy. No one remembered them for their rules or order. They were remembered as the people who went too far, who thought power was stronger than community. Karen, once the loudest voice, was now silent. She could not escape the looks of disappointment every time she stepped outside. The HOA, once feared, was nothing more than a broken shell of what it tried to be. Their regret was heavy, and their reputation was gone. And in the middle of it all, the neighborhood stood proud, stronger, brighter, free. The battle that began with one absurd rule ended with a lesson everyone could see from the painted walls around them. Power does not belong to those who force control. It belongs to those who stand together. And in that unity, the neighborhood found something Karen could never control: hope.